Hi, this is Heidi Burgess, and this is the second in the series of videos that we're entitling Business as Usual. This one is entitled Boys Will Be Boys. It's Human Nature. Many people assume that boys fight. I know my boys did, and I didn't constantly try to break up the fights. I thought they were inevitable, and it was important to let them figure out how to solve their problems on their own. Adults fight too. We assume that men do it more than women, and probably that's true, although the data show that plenty of women engage in fighting as well. The assumption is that fighting and even war is inevitable, that it's human nature. Now, of course, scientists, I remember back in the 70s, I believe there was something called the Scoville Report, debunked the notion that war is human nature, but it is still something that is widely believed. And it's one of a number of reasons why we spend so much money on our military and so little money on peace building. Because the only way to prevent war, many people assume, is through military deterrence, and that won't always work. So you need to be sure that you're prepared. Similarly, many people believe that the world is made up of winners and losers. It's a competitive place, and you better be prepared to win. So you have to be strong, you have to know how to fight well, and you have to be very competitive. Otherwise, you're going to end up on the bottom of the heap. Consistent with that is the notion that conflicts are zero-sum, or win-lose. And this is typically discussed metaphorically in terms of a pie. That the more pieces of a pie one side gets, the less there will be for the other side. So the goal in zero-sum situations is to get as much as you can for yourself, leaving as little as possible for the other side. This leads to the notion that compromise is a dirty word. And we heard this over and over again from John Boehner, who was the majority leader, Republican majority leader of the U.S. House of Representatives for the last 4 years until he resigned rather recently, that position being taken over by Paul Ryan. Boehner made a no compromise pledge, which I have quoted here at the bottom. He said, "We're going to do everything, and I mean everything we can do, to kill Obama's agenda, to stop it, to slow it down wherever we can." The video shown to the right, and the transcript will have the URL so you can click on it, has Boehner trying to explain the difference between compromise, which is a word he says he rejects, and common ground. He said that he was going to try to find common ground with Obama. Well, of course, they very seldom succeeded in doing that, because they were engaged in what conflict resolvers refer to as positional bargaining. My side or your side. Well, if you're going to engage in positional bargaining, the only way to come to an agreement is to compromise. And if compromise is a dirty word, then you have to start focusing on interests and try to find a way to meet both sides' interests at the same time. I can't think of any times when the Republicans and Democrats did that in the last 4 years with Obama. This is being played out even more so in the 2016 presidential debate. Has anyone heard Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders or Ted Cruz talk about compromise? They don't. They have an agenda, they know they're right, and by gosh, they're going to fight for it. So we're seeing the no compromise game being played out even more in the presidential election. There's no talk like there was in the early Obama administration of this being a purple country as opposed to a red country and a blue country, which means Republican and Democrat for folks who are not familiar with those terms. We're not talking about bringing people together anymore. We're talking about having our side win and the other side be demolished. The Pew Research Center in June 2004 did an interesting study where they asked both Republicans, conservatives, and liberals what they thought of compromise. About 34% of consistent conservative people and consistent Republican people thought that compromise was good, which they measured by asking them how often they thought their side should win as opposed to the other side should win. And about 34% thought they should split 50-50, and the Dems should win 50% of the time and the Republicans should win 50% of the time. But 66% thought that their side should win more often than the other side. And the consistently liberal and consistently conservative folks thought their side should win a lot more often than the other side. I got these slides out of order, but let me skip to this one. People who are consistently liberal, in other words, they answered 10 different questions in a liberal way, said Obama should get 2/3 of his way and Republicans should only win 1/3 of the time. 16% of them thought Obama should win 90% of the time or more. In other words, never compromise. People who answered the questions consistently conservatively were exactly reversed. They thought the Republicans should get what they want 66% of the time, and the Democrat should only win 34% of the time. But a higher number, 22% of consistent conservatives, thought Republicans should win 90% or more of the time. Going back to this slide, when Pew asked consistent liberals and consistent conservatives what they thought of compromise, conservatives said only 32% of them said that they liked their officials to make compromises, and 63% said they wanted their officials to stick to their positions. This is fundamentally different from consistent liberals, 82%, who said they want their officials to compromise, and only 14% said that they want their officials to stick to their own positions. But that's not actually what liberals and conservatives advocate when they're asked whether Democrats or Republicans should win more or less. So in reality, conservatives are strongly anti-compromise, and the best you can say about conservatives is they're ambivalent. This leads to a high degree of cynicism, the assumption that nothing can be done, that enemies are enemies and they should be overpowered or isolated or ignored. This is especially true when the enemies are spoilers, in other words, people who are trying to stop compromise. They particularly need to be overpowered, isolated, or ignored. Now, I should be clear, that's not what Guy and I think. That's what many other people think. Even peace builders think that the only way to deal with spoilers is to overpower them, isolate them, I should say humiliate them, or ignore them. This is another recipe for staying in intractable conflicts. One of the goals of this project is breaking what we call the cynicism cap or the cynicism barrier. All of these assumptions that keep us from exploring new ways of getting beyond stalemate, new ways of getting beyond the refusal to compromise. We firmly believe that there are ways to do this. We want to accelerate the learning curve whereby peace-building professionals, ourselves, and ordinary citizens figure out better ways of breaking the cynicism cap, approving the notion that boys will be boys, war is inevitable, the only way to fight is to win. We have to change those attitudes, and we're going to be exploring ways to do that.